you know that a significant number of children are dismissed from childcare centers each year due to behavioral challenges? It's a startling statistic that underscores the need for effective behavior management frameworks for our childcare centers. And I'm not any different, and I'm not going to pretend I know all the answers. So today we're going to dive deep and talk about how we can bridge the gap between parents and centers and teachers to support children effectively while ensuring safe and nurturing environments for everyone involved. Now, I'm a childcare director. Every day I go into my centers, and I know that there are 4 or 5 major areas that this really impacts. The first I'm going to say is inconsistent behavior management. You might have some teachers who are really great at behavior management practices in their classroom, but does it look different in other classrooms? And that sometimes can lead to confusion or ineffective handling of behavior issues. The second thing I would say is staff confidence and training. Teachers may lack confidence in managing challenging behaviors due to insufficient training or support. And then, of course, there's the collaboration with parents. There can be sometimes a disconnect between strategies used in a childcare center and what's reinforced at home. And this can hinder the effectiveness of a behavior management. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, they don't do that at home. I'm like, well, they're not in a room with 12 other friends all day long for 9 hours. So I believe you when you say it doesn't happen at home, but it's not the same environment. So let's compare apples to apples. Also, turnover for staff is high, and staff morale right now is a problem for centers everywhere. So high turnover, low staff morale can really exacerbate the ongoing behavioral challenges, especially when they're not effectively managed. And staff start to feel like you'll just take anybody. And then safe and positive learning environments. Without a clear behavior management strategy, maintaining a safe and positive environment for all children can be difficult, if not sometimes impossible. So we are joined today with an amazing guest who's going to talk to us a little bit about what we can do. And some strategies might be things that you're using already, and others we hope will have an aha moment that will really help you move the needle and make your environment one where your teachers feel heard, valued, and supported, and families and children the same. So I'm going to hack your name. I should have asked you before. Just say your name for me, please.
Janie Kokakis.
Kokakis, got it. So Janie is a
language pathologist.
Language pathologist. So we talked a little bit online, and I was checking out her social media, and she had a lot of great insight. And so I thought I would ask her to come on the show because I know behavioral challenges is at the top of the 5 stresses that you have every day as a childcare owner. I know it because I live it, guys. I live it every day just like you. So tell us a little bit about how you came to the field and just a little bit about.
Yeah, so with speech language pathology, it's kind of a broad category when you're going through school. Like there's so much from like swallowing to language, just everything. But I really started diving deep into executive functions, which is basically how we get things done in life. When we found out my son was diagnosed with ADHD. So he really kind of like sparked and lit a fire under my butt because I was like, wow, he's lagging executive function skills. And I took 6 years of schooling for this. So we started implementing so many strategies at home and they were working so well. But then, like you said, we were going to daycare and things were not going well there. And so it was like hard for me because I didn't want to say like, no, my child's not doing that because I knew we had an issue or we were struggling in areas. And so I started giving them strategies that they could use. And then we started seeing those behaviors really turn around in both areas. And so originally I started working with parents, just specifically parents. But then as I started working more, I was like, wow, there is a disconnect between centers and parents. And so now I have the opportunity to work with both centers and parents. So it's been a really fun experience and I have my son to thank for it.
Yeah, I love that you have both sides of that perspective. I do as well, but not to the same level. Both of my children have diagnosed special needs on different levels for sure. And as a parent, I would advocate. I clearly have a big mouth and I never shut up. So I would advocate for them. But there were times that, me and the school, it wasn't necessarily childcare, but me and the schools didn't always see eye to eye with their approach. And there never really was like, I felt like a genuine collaborative effort other than here's the IEP we made. Here you go, sign here, sign here. So it's so nice to see somebody who has both perspective from the parent side and, you know, the expert side. So thank you so much for bringing that.
Yeah, and I
So
feel like it's so hard too because like when you're a parent living through it, you're just literally trying to survive. Like, how can I survive this? And then when you feel like you don't have that extra support from outside places, it is so isolating.
mhm,
So, like, I always just remind people we always have to meet the parents too where they're at because, like, a lot of times they just need to hear, like, it's going to be okay. We're going to help you too.
yeah. And I'm going to say something funny that um, it's hard as the owner to make those decisions. And what supports can we realistically put in place?
Right, right.
When is it time that we have to terminate a child because we've, or, you know, a teacher's about to quit? It's like either me or this kid because I can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I've also had the experience many times, and I still do to today. Sometimes it's the staff's child, which is a whole nother level in dynamic as well. So, and I know I'm not alone in that too. So there's always, you know, there's that extra level of expectations for that child, the difficulty for that parent, the difficulty of the other parents, like, oh, the child gets away with it because they're a quote unquote staff kid. There's just, yeah, multiple layers. So talk to us a little bit about why talk to us a little bit about why having a structured behavior management.
Well, yeah, it's so important just for, staff consistency, like you talked about. Like, I mean, when we're thinking about our staff day to day and how many stressors they have, when they have to go in and they're having all of these behaviors that they're having to deal with, they're in a reactive state. So the more we can get our staff out of that reactive state and into that proactive state, the better they feel equipped, the more they can feel calm and kind of in control of their body and regulated. So then they can help the kids be regulated too. I think just really looking at that proactive approach rather than a reactive approach is
Yeah.
extremely important. And the reality is that we can't expect all of our staff to have training in that.
Yeah.
So, it's really our job to really help provide them with that. And then I also noticed too, and you probably noticed this, if one teacher is there and they do great with kiddos, and
Mhm.
then another teacher's there and they're not handling it the same way and
Mhm.
things just go haywire.
Yeah.
So if we have a consistent framework where kids know the expectations and you're hearing the same type of language throughout the entire center, it makes it so much easier for staff, but also so much easier for the kids to be able to understand what their expectations are.
I think too, and that's a great point. You know what I think? I think that we as teachers will commonly talk amongst each other and say, okay, what do you need this child to know or do before they move to the next room? Right. And so we build consistency in terms of the academic piece, right? Well, before
Mm-hmm.
they come in, I need them to be able to hold a pencil. They need to use the potty on their own, like whatever your center's expectations are. But then the way that they deliver behavior management is often very different. So I
Yeah.
think, as we're working on having high quality programs and having that continuity, there should be at least some type of consistency. Teachers are going to have
Mm-hmm.
different personalities and different relationships. Let's be honest about that. But, how we handle it in one room can't look in the next room. Of course, you have to keep in mind age of child and the expectations and, what's acceptable as a 2-year-old would be different than a 4-year-old. But overall, the way that you handle things should be somewhat consistent. And so parents know what to expect too, right? You'll have a child that's in a classroom who hasn't got a phone call or a message from a parent, from a teacher about their child's behavior ever. And then they move to your room and you've called them 5 times in 4 days. So,
Mm-hmm.
so, you got to have some, but these are real things. I mean,
Yeah.
this is everyday life, right? So, how do we do that? So let's talk about what are some of the common challenges that staff face when handling behavioral issues, and how?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to, if you think about when you're seeing behaviors, is it during transitions? Is it during these kind of chaotic moments? And a lot of it comes from front loading those expectations. And we think, okay, so I'm just going to tell them, hey, we're going to clean up in a few minutes. The problem is executive function skills are not developed until like age 30. So like worse, everybody, and you can still develop them all throughout your age. So we really have to meet the kids where they're at. And there's so many layers to executive function skills too. So we talk about like social emotional learning, which is great. But also below that are the executive function skills, which are the key to academics too. So like if we don't have that base of executive function skills, then we're also going to be struggling in academics. We're going to be struggling with emotional regulation. That is an executive function skill. But I think the key too is just remembering that like as these kids are growing, we really need to help them visualize the steps they're going to need to take. And in order to do that, we need to help them make mental pictures in their heads, which is our working memory. And that doesn't develop, until I think about like age 3 to 5 is when we really start seeing it happen, where kids can follow 2-step directions. But I always tell people, focus, if you're having a few kids, start paying attention to them and like, oh, I notice every time I tell them to put their toys away and go to the center that they're not doing it. Well, instead of thinking of it as a behavior, let's peel some layers back and think, whoa, maybe their working memory is lagging. So working memory is like, think of it as compartments. So, when you get those codes, like the authentication codes, you have to remember those 6 digits and you have to look at it 6 times in order to get it. That is your working memory. So our kiddos only have so many compartments to remember things. So when we have 2-step directions and they're only getting 1 and then they're getting distracted, that just tells us that maybe we need to make it visual. We need to model it. We really just need to help kind of peel back those layers and figure out really what skill is lagging. And the great thing that is we don't necessarily have to focus on one kid for that either. This can be like a whole kid picture. So I know a lot of times people are like, we don't have time to be able to focus on just one kid constantly. We're dealing with a ton of kids. All of these strategies can be implemented and be helpful for all of our kids because we know all of our kids' executive function skills are building as they're growing too.
So, can you explain to maybe the listeners who aren't sure, like, what do you keep saying executive function skills?
Yeah. So there are so many different executive function skills. It's a very broad term, but think of it from anything from brushing your teeth to paying your bills. So it is planning and organizing, it's emotional regulation, self-restraint or inhibiting what you want to do. So if you have those kiddos that just instantly respond and hit their friend, that's an executive function skill. So that's when we talk about social emotional learning, but even below that are those executive function skills that we need to work on really growing and helping them build in order for them to be able to control their emotions and manage their behaviors.
So, what are some actionable tips?
Yeah, I think one of the easiest ones, and it's honestly one of my favorites because it especially helps too with ADHD kiddos, because if you've ever noticed an ADHD kiddo, they don't like to be told what to do. Like and all kids don't, but like especially you start seeing that defiance all the time. And when we're talking about every day, if you think about these kids, every single kid in the world is hearing so many commands constantly. Go do this, go do that, go do this. So it can be like kind of overwhelming and make kids want to rebel. And so one of the things I like to tell people to use is declarative language. So instead of pick up the toys, we just say, I noticed there's some toys on the floor. And what that does is you're going to have to wait a second, give them some time to process it. But what it does is it helps them start really using their executive function skills in the front of their brain and start like planning out and picturing themselves, oh, there's toys on the floor. Okay, I'm problem solving. Maybe I should go pick that up. Now they're picturing themselves going to pick it up. And then you see more likely they're going to start doing that. It does take time, but it's a great strategy to start using to help decrease like that defiance of not wanting to listen and also building those skills. Because too, when we always tell them what to do, like go pick up the toy, the teacher is using their executive function skills and their working memory, picturing that kid going to pick up the toy, but the kid is not using their executive function skills. So it's a great, just like easy way to just start building it. There's literally just statements. It's not requiring any response or any question. It's just a statement. I notice, I wonder, I wonder if we should put those toys away or something like that. Just starting to really build that skill.
That's a great example. So, I'm using the word framework. Can you explain maybe what would that look like? Like, all right, I'm excited.
Yeah. So when we're talking about these executive function skills and building it, we're talking about behavior management a lot. But the thing is we have to build the skill in order for them to manage the behaviors. So first off, we need to understand executive function skills is the most important. I think it's really important that everyone has a clear understanding, especially in early childhood, what executive function skills are, because they're a better predictor for success than IQ. And so once we start really like understanding what all these skills are, working memory, emotional regulation, inhibiting, organizing, planning, attention, focus, all of those things are executive function skills, then we can start noticing where our kiddos are struggling. And honestly, most of the strategies come down to language. So like I just gave you that declarative language statement, it's simple language tweaks the majority of the time that we can do in our centers to help build these skills. It doesn't take like a complete overhaul of your center to start implementing skills. It just takes like, oh, instead of saying, go get this, I'm going to say it this way. And so that's kind of where we always start, is really tweaking the language that we use.
Yeah.
But the most important thing, and I think, Erica, you do a good job about talking about this too, is building that rapport with the kids. And that's kind of the part that people often leave out. You really have to have a strong relationship with all of these kids. And one of the easiest ways to do it is through meaningful praise. So meaningful praise is a little different than just like the generic praise when we're talking about like, oh, good job, you did awesome, I love that. It's really like, wow, I noticed that you put your toy away right away. Before, you wouldn't have put it away and I would have had to ask you 2 times. I really appreciate that. It's really building that self-confidence.
Yeah, I love that, and I think too what I love to I even like to flip that a little bit more, because I really want kids to feel proud about the things they do on their own without somebody like validating that.
Yeah.
So I really do love to say things too, like, "Hey, I noticed you did that. You must be so proud of yourself.
Yes.
You did that without my help. Look at
Yes.
you," right?
I do love that. I love that
Yeah.
phrase. You should be proud of yourself, or you must be proud of yourself. I love that phrase.
Yeah, because I want kids to have that feeling of, even if somebody doesn't always catch you doing, you feel. I think that sometimes, as you said, teachers will, I guess, expect that kids have it all figured out. Like you said, we're using our own adult brain and trying to be like, why doesn't this kid get it? And sometimes teachers will come to me, frustrated. And I don't mean to make light of it, but sometimes I try to break the tension and go, oh my God, you mean they don't have it figured out at 2 years old yet? And they usually will laugh and go, all right, Miss Erica, I get it. But, they're like, I'm like, because they're 2 years old, they're 3 years old. They don't have it all figured out yet, right? And so our job as the guide in the room is to help them figure it out. And like you said, example and all these things, and setting them up for success, picture cues, picture schedules.
Yes.
All these things are things that, again, help with that working memory. Oh, this is where this goes, right? So I think, just setting kids up for success is so important. So let's talk about the bosses. Right? Let's talk about these big leaders in our buildings. The directors. How can directors and leaders effectively introduce and implement a new behavior management framework for their staff? Like, let's say, okay, the staff can't or have not been able to figure out what's this framework look like. And again, if we want consistency throughout classrooms, some of that's going to come from the program.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is getting your staff on board and really helping them understand the important role that they play in these kids' lives, because it's so easy to forget, how much of a pivotal role we really do play when you're seeing these kids day in and day out. And specifically with these executive function skills, which I'll say all the time, because really it is the foundation of what we do. But they're at rapid growth between 3 and 5 years old. So that is like when they're seeing the most growth. So if you think about your centers, that's a lot of kiddos from
Yeah.
3 to 5 that are really in that rapid growth. So I always remind our leaders and our directors, we really have to remind our staff just how important they are to these kids' lives because, day in and day out, they're stressed and they're dealing with a lot. And executive function skills is like a tank, so as adults, if you can think like the beginning of the week, we're like, woo, we're doing good. And by the end of the week, it's like, so I mean, we really have to remember too that our teachers too have tanks of executive function skills. And so meeting them where they're at, but reminding them, hey, like this system is meant to really help you throughout your day. You're going to be building these kids' skills, but also you're going to know exactly how to handle these situations. You're going to feel like you have a proactive instead of a reactive approach. So I think the most important thing is really just getting them on board right away.
Yeah. So I love, love, love books. Like, I love books. So we have a teacher library at my locations where I have
Mm-hmm.
lots of children books, but I also have lots of teacher books. Are there any good resources, books, trainings, etc., that you recommend?
Yeah, there are some, especially any book on executive functions, honestly, like really, I know I'm hitting that people are like, can you stop talking about executive
Oh, talk
functions?
about it.
But I can't remember the author. I wish I could remember her name, but she also wrote a book on declarative language, which is super insightful for parents and staff too. And I wish I could remember the book. I'll have to get back to you on it.
Okay.
But yeah, so I think literally if you see a book that says executive functions,
Okay.
that's your thing, just to build that better understanding.
Okay. Um, so how can centers collaborate with parents to reinforce the behavioral strategies to ensure home and
That's a hard one. I mean, it
yeah.
is a day-to-day struggle. It's on both ends. You saw it on, I saw it personally on my end, me having the experience and seeing the daycare not having like the knowledge. But then it also goes the other way too, where sometimes these parents are in fight or flight and they're honestly either not seeing it at home
Mm-hmm.
because like you said, different environment, or they're like, I am lost and I don't know what to do, and I really don't want to admit right now that there's a problem because I am
Yeah.
just trying to survive. I think the biggest thing, this is one of the biggest things that's helped our centers, is once you start talking about these skills, there's some parents who really like want all the information. Those go-getters who are coming to you, coming in your office being like, I need help. I don't know what to do. Are you seeing this here too? Like, I'm lost. But then there's other parents that are like, nah, not happening. Like, I don't see it at home, not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
You guys deal with it there. So I think then what happens is those parents, you're not just going to like be able to say, hey, do this. Like, do this now. You need to do this. It's going to come through education. And I always tell people, the more you're educating through your newsletters, through your social media posts, if you have kids playing a game, instead of just saying, oh, we had fun playing outside, let's talk about those executive function skills. Oh, when we played ball tag outside and when you got out, we worked on our inhibition skills and you had to hold back and self-restrain from getting upset and use our emotional regulation skills. So the more we just start like dripping those little pieces of education with like very passively, making it very engaging in our newsletters or whatever we're doing, the more parents, their wheels start turning. And then eventually you just start seeing too those parents coming to you more like, hey, I see what you're saying now. Like, I do see a problem. Like, I want help. And that's one of the things that we're really serious about too, because if you do not, especially with ADHD, but this goes for all kids, after like Christmas break, how crazy it can be. Like, all the hard work we just put in is
Yeah.
gone. So the thing is like creating that consistency. So with our framework, we have a parent portal and we also have a center portal, and we really focus on the same exact strategies, except for they're just tailored towards the parents and then they're tailored towards the center. So really finding that cohesiveness. So if you find a strategy that's working for this kid, relaying that to the parent is going to be so important.
Yeah. So we're really Rhode Island early learning standards. And part of the standards, they put together a complimentary mm, I pack it, I guess is the word I'm going to use, but it's family fun activity cards and they're
That's
connected to
awesome.
each domain. And so we didn't, I don't want to say we didn't have to think about it, but we really didn't have to think about it. And you could share those activities, as you said, in the newsletter or when you're making those book bags that go with the students, as part of their homeschool connection type of activities. You can use these strategies as part of what you're doing. It's just part of your traditional curriculum without, like you said, pointing out like, hey, there's a problem here, right? So sometimes
Yeah.
they have to discover it on their own, or at least you're opening up about working memory,
Mm-hmm.
about, the functions, about where a child is at. Yeah, I think that that's always a great way to do it. And then people are more receptive because it's not
Yeah.
necessarily
Yeah.
about them. And I think you're right too. Educating parents is part of what we do. It's not just our children, it's our teachers, it's our
Mm-hmm.
parents, right? Good leadership, make sure that all those folks have resources. And when you build your teacher's library, you can certainly share those books with your parents and your families as well and say, hey, I have this lending library of books for kids and books for parents. So being really strategic about that, and the more you have those conversations, even bringing in workshops to your center, which we do anyway for PD for our teachers, invite the parents. Say, hey, we're
Yeah.
having a workshop this month on XYZ. Parents are welcome to come as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great way to get people together in a informal setting, whether we start to talk about, you know, things that are going on in the classroom. I think
Yeah.
it be
Yeah.
probably the
Well,
way
and
to
I
say
think
it.
connection is so important, just like with our kids. Connection is the number one key with parents, too. So the more we're doing to help connect with those parents, the better they're going to be more receptive to any types of, you
Yeah.
know, feedback that you can give them.
Yeah. My favorite thing to talk about is taking care of people. And if you listen to my show all the time, folks know that literally is my favorite thing to talk about. And I think that, again, just like we talk about having those deep relationships with students, you also need to have with the parents. Again, of
Mm-hmm.
course, obviously in a professional setting, but I feel like it's less
Yeah, and so much easier too. You feel a lot more comfortable
hmm
going to them when you're only talking to them when things are going wrong. Then it's like,
Yeah.
whew, this
Yeah.
is
They shut you
heavy.
down. Yeah. They
Yeah,
shut you down.
yeah.
So, what role
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge role because, like I said, like language matters so much. You can tweak one little word and it can like directly change the entire trajectory of the day. So I really just think it's so important that teachers understand their role. And then two, I mean, staff morale, we want to make sure that we're having a good morale and our teachers feel supported. And one of the best ways we can do that is to implement, a system. And one thing that, so I have ADHD too, which I found out when my son was diagnosed. So fun fact. But one of the things that I always struggled with was I love learning. Like I also love learning. I love going to conferences. I
hmm
loved doing all this stuff. But when I would go to a conference, I'd be like, I am implementing this, 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 this. And then I'd come back and I'd be like, what am I implementing? Like, I can't retain all that information. So I think it's really important to remind staff, like, it doesn't have to be like, we don't have to create this huge behavior management system and implement it right away, like everything. So it's like, let's learn a little bit today and then let's implement that right away. And then we'll come back to it next week and we'll learn something else and we'll implement it. So that slow growth where we're just focusing on like one or two things to start
hmm
using, I think can be so beneficial for centers because otherwise you're trying to implement way too much and staff already has a lot going on. So
Yeah, and I think that is like, anything else, like when you first start going, like you're going to get fit, right? You can't do all the things at once, right? You're not just going
yeah,
to go in the gym and stop benching 500 pounds, right?
yeah.
It's just not going to happen. But I think too, when you go to conferences, I think having different methods in which you learn. And then, like you said, make a list of the top 10 ahas that
Mm-hmm.
you came away from that conference. Circle your top two,
Yep.
implement those, really get good at those. And then you could say, all right, maybe that reduced behaviors by 35%.
Yeah.
Okay, now you can add another one. Now you're at 45%, and just keep chipping away at it to get to a point where you're like, all right, this feels good.
Well, yeah, and don't you feel like it's so much better too when you're implementing something and everybody's implementing it together and you can like talk about it like, whoa, I did this with so and so and it actually worked. Oh, I'm going to go try that with Bobby then. You know,
Yeah.
it just that also helps improve that morale because everybody's kind of talking about it and everybody's starting to implement those same few things at the same time. And it grows your staff's confidence too.
Yeah. So you said you work with other childcare centers. So can you share a success story or an example where they really were able to turn something around?
Yeah, so we had one pre-K and kindergarten that we worked with, and they implemented our system, and we were lucky because they do like behavior slips. So it was an easy way to kind of like track how their
Hmm.
behavior went. But we started off really slow, like started with the meaningful praise, front loading expectations, and really creating those visuals for the kids. And then also implementing that declarative language. And by the end of the year, tallied their behavior slips and they were down by 30%. Staff was like reporting that, hey, we're not yelling during transitions or like raising our voices anymore because we have this clear framework and we know exactly what these kids know exactly what to expect and they kind of follow it because we've been working on their working memory. So by the end of the year, they saw a 30% reduction in those behavior management.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, yeah,
So I have a few more questions, but
yeah.
before we do that, I just want to say to the folks that are listening today, if you're finding that these are really great practical tips that you feel like you can implement, we want you to stay part of the conversation. So hop on over to our Instagram channel, like us at CCDC Podcast, Child Care Directors Chair Podcast, and let's keep the conversation going because I really want to hear from you guys. Like this channel really is for you. Don't mind me, I drink Celsius today, so this channel really is for you, and I really want to give you guys some actionable things that you can take and implement today. So I want to kind of dig into that a little bit. So let's talk about something that's very real. Because as a director, I can go back from a conference and say, here's all the great things we're going to do. And we all know we're going to get a few of those staff who are going to push back. They either don't like change or that's never going to work or they're negative Nancy before you've even started. And because you've met those negative Nancys. So how do we deal with that? How do we with that kid?
Yeah, so I'd like to say the easy way out is saying, well, I'm sorry, there's the door, but but we know that's not always possible. And, with the staffing issues, like that's not always a reality for centers. Like we need to keep people on staff. So one of the things, like meet them with some tough love. Say like, hey, this is like what we're expecting. This is our new expectation. And these really are our new guidelines. I understand that change is hard. It's hard for me too. And I know it can be hard for everybody. But in order for us to try to get through these behaviors or to get through this and really to help you feel less stressed at the end of the day, we need to try something. So this is what we're going to try. I'd like for you just to take, an effort. And at least if you don't want to do it, just try not to say anything and, implement it. And then we can always discuss, 2 weeks down the road, come to me and tell me how you're feeling. And I'd like to keep the discussion open. I think
Yeah.
the more you're open and honest and just realistic, and just like with kids, when we're setting those expectations, being a leader and a director, it's not always an easy job. Sometimes we do have to kind of say, hey, this is
Yeah.
the expectation. This is how we're going to try it.
I think that is really good advice. There's a few other things I think I want to just maybe add to that. The first thing I would say is if you really believe that you have the best staff, I let them know. I say, I think we have the best team here. And I very confident that you can do it. Let's talk about here's what I think we can do. Let's talk about it. Like you said, what do you see in this plan that you think can work? Let's start there, right? Because people can get overwhelmed very easy with change. I'm not a person who has a problem with change, but I recognize that it is hard. And I'm definitely one of those like very big picture people like, we're going to do this. We're going to, my staff like, oh dear Lord, here she goes, right? But I also like to remind them that although I do that to them, every time we've set that expectation, we have met it. And we are all here to support the kids, and being a good leader is bringing them, your staff, the resources that they need to be able to do their job. And so that's kind of the way I roll it out. It's not like, oh, I went to this conference. Here's all the great things I brought back for you to do. It's more of a team approach. Like, I'm very confident. Here are the strategies I learned about. Where do we want to start? And that might be a way to make the change a little bit more palatable, a little bit easier for them to digest and break it down into smaller pieces. And again, make it like they have to be part of the conversation. I know that that's the worst thing, and I've been there. I mean, I didn't always own my own center, right? I've worked for people in my life too, and that's the worst thing, is like not feeling like you're a part of the bigger picture. So, and if you have the opportunity to some of the conferences.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you mentioned that too. And I love that you're talking about like building on past successes. That's so important. Like, hey, we did this. Like, you've done hard things. You've been through a lot of transitions, a lot of changes, and we made it out on the other end.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I love that idea.
Yeah, and some of my staff can really relate from the parent perspective, because many of us have children, and many of them have had some challenges. I actually have literally, I'm going to gush on my folks a little bit. I literally have some of the most amazing ladies ever that work for me. So many of them are foster parents or adoptive parents who have taken children who have trauma and a long list of challenges into their homes for the rest of their life. Love my team for that. And birds of a feather really do flock together. I also am a adoptive parent, and so we know that there are going to be challenges, and sometimes the challenges happen when they're young. Sometimes it continues throughout their lifetime, but we know that, and that's the kind of people I work with. And so that's why I can feel with full confidence, I can say to them, guys, we can do hard things because we do them every day. And I love my team. So can we give folks some actionable things that they can do tomorrow at their center, their podcast?
Yeah, for sure. I think first, try that declarative language that we talked about. Try using statements instead of commands, and just see. It doesn't have to be during like crazy times. I never want you to implement something when you're stressed. Do it during like a calmer time, maybe when they're eating and they have to go put their plate away. Hey, I noticed you haven't put your plate away yet, instead of go put your plate away. So that's a great one to start with. Meaningful praise, like you said, that's like the cornerstone of where we're really going to get behavior change, is making sure the kids feel seen and heard. So implementing that praise as soon as you can in the morning, when you see maybe your kiddo who struggles a little bit more, when you see them doing something good, like they brought their backpack to their cubby right away, notice that, call them out on that. And that's going to build that like little dopamine hit for them. And they're going to want to do that more. And then one of the strategies I also really love is, it's called an you choose. So if you choose to do this, you choose to do that. So you can implement it with a reward, or you can implement it with a consequence. Kids work differently, so you can try both. So, hey guys, if you choose to put all the toys away when we ask, you guys choose to do your favorite song. Maybe that's Baby Shark, or you choose to have 5 extra minutes outside. Building those kind of like, you're choosing, it's in your ballpark. But if you choose not to do it, know that you don't get this. Or if you choose not to put away your toys, you're choosing not to do this song with your friends. Using that in whichever way you have to, but that kind of builds that feeling of like, oh, I am in control of myself and I need to make that decision. So that's those are like my top 3 favorite things that people can implement that are like super easy, all just tweaking your language to really help build these skills in the kids.
Yeah, I think I would love for people to remember that when you set up positive environments or strategies, it helps all students, those with behavioral challenges and those without. And I also think the things that you praise the most are the things that are going to, or things that I don't know. So
that is such a good point. Like,
yeah,
sometimes we just need to ignore those behaviors. Like, if they're small enough, safety first, obviously. But if these behaviors that are happening are small enough to where we can just ignore it,
yeah,
sometimes that's better, because you know what? A negative dopamine hit and a positive
It
dopamine hit
feels the
are the
same.
same exact thing.
Feels the same. Feels the same. And the other thing I think is really important as we're talking about the kids. I want to talk about my teachers for a minute. When we're setting up environments for children to succeed, I also think we need to think about setting up environments for the adults to succeed. And so when you had said really way at the beginning too, like giving your calming energy to students, I think you set the tone of the classroom, not the 3-year-old. You set the tone. They're going to do what they're going to do because they're 3, 4, and 5 years old. I think we set the tone of the classroom. So if you feel the energy in the room is getting high, instead of, like you said, barking commands, what can you do as the grown up to figure out how can we bring this energy down in a positive way? In a way that makes not only the children feel better, but you as the adult. And it took me a long time to figure this out. But I do things like yoga and meditation in your classroom, you're missing out. If you don't have plants and fish in your classroom, you're missing out. Um, I think that these types of things help set the tone in the classroom. Taking care of your plants and your fish, we learn about taking care of our classroom community, which sometimes means putting empathy. Like there's 1,000 things that you can do, but beautiful, and you don't have to have a lot of money, but beautiful environments that are calm, that are clean, that smell good, make us all feel good, right? So nobody wants to be in chaos, trash, coming out the can and it smells like poop and all those things. No, I'm just talking from a place of love, right?
Real. Yeah.
So this is real. This is where we talk about the real things. I think, think about your environment. Those of you that are leaders, we have this is going to sound so silly. We have this eucalyptus spray. It's all essential oils that I have in my office. And sometimes when teachers are stressed, they'll come in my office, they spray the spray, and they just take 5 minutes. And it literally works like that. Works like that. So I think I had put a picture on my social media like 3 weeks ago, and it was just a picture of the bottle. I just wrote, if you know,
I love it.
You could just, it's also the environment.
Well, yeah, and if we're not taking care of ourselves too, it's going to leak into the kiddos. And the more we can model calmness, the more they're going to learn the calmness. I also love the idea of, when our kids are really loud and they're not listening. And so a lot of times, naturally, we want to raise our voice, like you said.
Do you talk softer?
Just whisper. I know. It makes such a difference.
It does. The kids look at you like you're crazy. I just sit on the floor. I'm like,
they listen. I think really a big thank you needs to go out. I think it's not necessarily something, I just think we need to remind our directors how important of a role they really play. And you too. I mean, the energy that you have to provide day in and day out for your staff, for your kids, for your parents is honestly, I can't even fathom. It's so much energy. So just remember, when you're noticing all the positives that your staff's doing and maybe you're not reaping that, hearing it back, just know that people notice your behavior. People notice everything. So even if they're not saying it, we really appreciate you, and the world needs more of you. Yeah. So you can follow me at Posy Kids. It's Posy, 2 Z's, and then kids with a Z. I didn't think about that. It's a little hard. But also posykids.com, you can find more information, whether you're a parent or a daycare center.
Awesome. So thanks to all of you for tuning in to today's episode of the Childcare Directors Share podcast. We hope that you have found the insights on behavior management valuable, like I know I sure did. Before you go, I have a quick favor to ask. If you enjoyed today's discussion, why not explore more episodes? Our library is packed with valuable content designed to support and inspire your role as a early childhood educator or childcare director. Check out episodes that you might have missed. Dive into a wealth of knowledge that we have to offer here on this channel. We bring the best of the best on. We give you a voice. Please, if you want to come on a show, send me a message. You can find me on any of the media platforms, and I will respond back to you.